Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. I welcome you all to the Hindu newspaper analysis for today. Also, I hope by now all of you already are a part of our Telegram channel. If that is not the case, please use the link given in the description of the video to join our Telegram channel where you will get all the latest current affairs updates about the UPSC examination. Now, let's begin with the first article that is written on the theme of India's development. The author here, who's a former member of the Planning Commission, says that for the last couple of decades, the entire world has been waiting for the huge development of the BRICS nations. The fast growth of BRICS nations has been predicted by multiple organizations around the world. However, such predictions are not always found to be true. For example, no one around the world had predicted how China's rise will be so meteoric, but it has happened. Similarly, no one had predicted that the Soviet Union, once the biggest bloc in the entire world, would collapse so spectacularly that would lead to the end of the Cold War. Thus, predictions made at the international level about specific nations don't always turn out to be true. In this aspect, the author is saying that we need to look at a very interesting report that actually came out a couple of decades back. So, the World Economic Forum in 2004 collaborated with CII, that is Confederation of Indian Industry, to prepare a report where they talked about different scenarios. Now, what about the scenarios? Meaning that this report said that there are multiple options that India can now take in the future to ensure their growth. Depending upon which scenario actually translates into reality, India's growth will be seen in the future. Now, this is not a new report, it's an old report. It was given in 2005, so there is no reason for that to be in the news, but just that the author is now referring to that particular report. The author is saying that in that report of World Economic Forum and CII, the title of the report was India and the World Scenarios to 2025. The report said there are three options that India has for its growth, or three scenarios that you can see how India can grow in the coming decades. The first scenario was called Bolly World. This was a scenario where India would see a lot of growth. There would be many more millionaires that would be born in India. People's purchasing power will improve. But at the same time, this will not be spread all across the country. While some people will gain a lot of money, a lot of power, the other people will not have that much power. Thus, this inequality in terms of economics within the society might lead to more urban crimes. That was the first situation. Why the name Bollywood? Because it said that many people around the country would be very inspired by Bollywood, by glitz and glamour, and that would actually lead to a sort of disagreement and discontent amongst many people. The second possible scenario, as per this report, was Atakta Bharat. Atakta means the India which is not really going on at a very fast pace. Atakta Bharat means a country which is actually stopping and then moving, stopping and then moving. Under this scenario, the government of India might be forced to impose controls on politics for security, and also the government might have to play a larger role in the economy without adequate resources. This also would be a scenario in which the government would actually have more control over the lives of the people, because we might not believe that the people can actually go ahead and progress on their own. These were the two negative scenarios pointed out in the report. Similarly, the report also said there's a third scenario, which is a positive scenario. That scenario will be where growth is actually ensured from the bottom up approach. So, at the local level, there would be women's self help groups, cooperatives, local enterprises, small businesses, MSMEs. These are the ones that will push forward India's growth story. That was the third scenario, which is an ideal scenario for India right now. This scenario was called Pehle India, while the first two scenarios thought that the growth of India would be from top down. Government will focus on the top end people and hope that the growth and development would then come down to a lower level. At the third scenario, it was expected that the growth will start from bottom and it will then raise to the top. Now, it depends which approach India actually takes, and the result of all these approaches will be very different depending upon that. ideally, we should have the third approach, because in a country such as India, where there is so much economic inequality, we have to understand that if we don't empower people at the grassroots level, we might never see the results of development that we are hoping for. So, third scenario is the ideal one for India. Now, the author also is saying that all these predictions about different scenarios were made in 2004 report. Close to 2 decades have passed. A lot of things have changed since then in India and around the world. G7 was enlarged to G20. Nations around the world have become more globalized. We have seen how the BRICS nations, which were once seen as a group that will now dominate the entire world, their growth is mainly now led by China only. Now, all these differences that we have seen mean that the scenarios that they were talking about, these are not the only scenarios where India can actually go forward. There are multiple other scenarios that may emerge in the coming years. The author also says that with G20 presidency now coming to India, India can ensure that the third scenario, where the development starts on the grassroots level, is taken up not just in India but around the world. That the nations focus on the Gandhian approach by empowering the people in the lowest rung of the society. Now, if you go to this report, which I did for you, this is the graphic that you would actually see being printed in that report. These are the three different scenarios. First, Pehle India, that is Pehle Bharat, which is inclusive growth and development. Inclusive growth and development means that you're ensuring that growth is spread all across the society and it includes as many people as possible. As the Prime Minister says, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. The Bolly world approach would be exclusive growth and development. So there would be growth and development, but only for a few people. Just like recently, Raghuram Rajan also said, India is actually experiencing a trend of jobless growth. So yes, there is growth that can be seen, but the jobs are not being created in exchange of that growth. And the third, Atakta Bharat, Bharat getting stuck, that will be isolation from the world, where the government is only controlling the entire market and the globalization trend is reversed. Now, I also want to talk to you about one more thing. Around the entire world in the past few years, we have actually been talking about something against globalization, which is protectionism. For example, when Donald Trump became the US president, he said that he wanted to follow the policy of America first, giving preference to his own country. Similarly, there are many countries around the world that are now following a policy of their goods getting the first preference over anyone else. That is called protectionism. In the long run, the policy of protectionism goes against the idea of globalization, goes against the idea that we should have a connected world altogether. As I said, America first, then Britain undertaking Brexit, all these are examples of how nations around the world are thinking that their country comes first and the other countries should come later. Now, India's Atmanirbhar policy can also be said to be an example of the same. Because Atmanirbhar again means that we don't want to be dependent on other nations and rather we want to have our own supply chains and our economy should not be dependent on others. As for many trade experts, protectionism in the long run would not be very fruitful for the world. Because the reason why the world is truly connected right now, the reason why a vaccine gets developed in one country but it spreads across the entire world is because we have a globalized world right now. In place of that, if we have a world that is following protectionism as a policy, where the borders are closed, we would have a situation where the fruits of development will not go all across the entire world. As India takes up the G20 presidency, India has this opportunity to push the world back towards the era of globalization rather than thinking about protectionism as a long term policy. The next article that we have here is on a very familiar issue, an issue which is very familiar but it has still remained unresolved. That is the pollution in Delhi, which is often blamed on stubble burning. Now, we all know the harmful effects of the Delhi pollution. It is not just restricted to Delhi, but it spreads across multiple cities in North India. Just that Delhi is the national capital, so we mainly talk about Delhi only. You would have seen various reports and data based on this air pollution problem. As per this article, India now loses close to 25 lakh lives due to air pollution. Some of these air pollutants are so small that they can very easily enter the bloodstream of the human body and impact almost all our organs. It might lead to issues such as stroke, heart diseases, respiratory diseases, and even cancer. Every single year we come up with same kind of measures. We close down the schools for a few weeks. We advise the people to stay indoors. We ask the people to have carpool, don't drive on their own vehicles. We ban the firecrackers, etc. But all these are just short-term solutions to a problem which is much, much bigger. And we have to understand, unless we have a proper long-term solution, this problem is not going anywhere. We often put all the blame on stubble burning. That stubble burning is the main reason for Delhi pollution. But the reality is that Delhi's air was not great even when stubble burning was not happening. Even without stubble burning, the air quality of Delhi still remains very, very, very bad. Thus, stubble burning cannot be the only reason behind all this pollution problem in Delhi. Also, just saying that stubble burning is an issue and the farmers should stop burning the stubble is not a solution. You have to understand the reason why the farmers actually have to burn the stubble. Because they are growing rice and wheat in such large numbers in Punjab and Haryana, which actually leaves them with a lot of stubble, they have to burn it so that they can get prepared for the next round of cultivation. The government here has a responsibility of pushing the farmers towards some other crops that don't generate all this stubble, all this waste products. For this, the government has to ensure proper MSPs being offered for other products. The government has to ensure that farmers have incentives of moving away from rice, moving away from wheat, etc. But that has not happened. Even though the government says we have announced MSP for other products as well, but in reality it is not being implemented properly. So just expecting the farmers to not grow rice, not grow wheat because rice takes a lot of water out as well, you can't really expect that the farmers will just follow it up because you are asking them to. Farmers have to be given an alternative. If they don't produce rice and wheat, then what should they produce? Would they get enough money for that or not? The government has to ensure that, and only then we will see an end to stubble burning. The farmers have to be compensated. Also, we have to look beyond stubble burning. As the article says, stubble burning cannot be the only reason. If you look at the scientific numbers, you will see Delhi's biggest problem in terms of pollution is its own dust and industrial activities. There's constant construction and manufacturing activities that are undertaken in Delhi that produces a lot of dust, that produces a lot of other harmful pollutants which have to be taken care of. Yes, we have launched a lot of projects about having green cover on the roadsides of Delhi, but there is no report that actually tells you what is the reality of those projects. Even in terms of public transport, we might implement schemes such as odd even, but the reality is, unless you have good public transport that gives you last mile connectivity, you cannot force the people to ditch their private transport. The reason why people in Singapore, for example, or UK don't take a lot of private vehicles and they travel by public connectivity is because they know that the public connectivity or public transportation will actually give them last mile connectivity and they don't need their own vehicles. The same has still not been ensured in India. For example, let's say you live in Delhi. Now, your place might be 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers away from a bus stand, or it might be 3 kilometers away from a metro station. Now, how would you cover that distance? There is still not much clarity on that. So, that is why the public transportation system has to improve and provide last mile connectivity as well. Now, it is fine that you can blame a lot of these problems on stubble burning, but a lot of studies have suggested already that stubble burning is not the only problem that Delhi is facing. Vehicular pollution, then the pollutants because of all this construction, industries, all this plays a major role. And the policies made by the government have to be directed towards countering all of them and not just stubble burning. There are a lot of great examples that you can learn from other places as well. Chhattisgarh, for example, has started a model for stubble utilization. Now, in this experiment, Chhattisgarh government has been setting up Gauthans. It is a dedicated 5-acre plot which is held in common by the entire village, where all the unused stubble is collected through people's donations. They are then converted to organic fertilizers by the government by mixing with cow dung and natural enzymes. This scheme has also generated employment for the young people in Chhattisgarh, and this can be emulated in other parts of the country as well. Not just this, apart from Chhattisgarh, also there are some other initiatives being taken. Like the Pusa Institute in Delhi has come up with microbe Pusa, which has been developed to reduce stubble burning. This actually hastens decomposition and converts stubble into compost within 25 days. Then we have the Happy Seeder machine as well. It's a tractor mounted machine which can be used to cut and lift the rice straws, sow wheat into bare soil, etc. And they won't produce a lot of stubble in that as well. These are some of the initiatives being taken up by different states such as Punjab and Haryana, but unfortunately, they have not had the kind of results that we have been hoping for. The next article that we have here is on India Germany relations, specifically because of the German foreign minister's visit to India. Now, India and Germany have had a lot of interesting agreements in the past as well. As you know, both these members are a part of the G4, the group along with Japan and Brazil that has been demanding reforms in the permanent membership of the Security Council. Now, Germany recently, before this visit, had agreed to fund renewable energy projects worth €1 billion in India. Germany has been one of those European nations that have been very, very vocal about the need for the entire world to shift towards renewable energy. And they have been trying to help countries as much as possible. However, the situation has changed in the past few months. As you know, because of the Ukraine Russia war, we have a situation where the energy prices coming in from Russia are increasing constantly. Because of which now nations such as Germany, France, etc., have to go back on coal. In fact, there's a very interesting example I want to give here. Last year, Germany had announced that they will actually give about €700 million to South Africa, asking them not to burn coal. Germany said to South Africa that we'll give you these €700 million and now please don't burn coal. In place of this, use some other forms of energy, spend money in doing that. And now the situation has become so bad that Germany, because it can't afford such expensive oil and gas from Russia because they don't want to buy it, now the same Germany is actually having to buy coal from South Africa because Germany now is actually burning its own coal for all this energy generation. So, on one hand, they were actually giving money to South Africa to stop burning coal, and now the same Germany is actually taking coal from South Africa to actually provide for its own energy. So, it all depends on the different circumstances that the nations are facing. As expected, India's foreign minister was asked this question by the German media: why is it that India is still buying a lot of oil from Russia? And the same answer was given that India is still not buying as much as Europe is buying right now. Also, after the oil price cap comes into the picture, Germany and other nations will actually buy even lesser oil from Russia in the coming days. Now, what exactly is the oil price cap? Now, this is a plan by G7 nations and Australia and European Union recently to curb the circulation of Russian crude oil in the market. Now, what have they said? They have said that anyone buying Russian oil can only buy it at $60 a barrel and not more than that. Any company that is buying oil from Russia at more than this price will not be given any shipping, insurance, or brokering services. In short, the companies are being forced that if you have to buy oil from Russia, you can only buy it at this price at max. If you go above that, you will not be given any facilities that you are expecting from our countries from now onwards. So this is again an attempt from the nations to try and ensure that oil circulation from Russia reduces in the international market. This has come into effect from the 5th of December and it will only apply to shipments which are loaded onto vessels after this date and not before this date. So it is expected that the Russian oil circulation might reduce even more in the coming days. India, on the other hand, has not changed its stand. We are still importing huge amounts of Russian oil. It has in fact increased by a multiple of 21 as compared to the last year or so. The reason why we are doing this is because of our national interest, and we think that the Western nations have not given us enough assurances or enough alternatives to not buy oil from Russia. At the same time, India and Germany ties have usually been pretty good. Apart from both the nations being member of the G4 group, the two nations also share very strong diplomatic ties as well after the Second World War. Germany cooperates with India about 1.3 billion euros a year in development projects. Most of these are in terms of climate change, saving natural resources, etc. Germany has also been supporting construction of a large solar plant in Maharashtra, which has a huge capacity of 125 megawatts as well. The two sides have been collaborating on many other issues as well whenever it comes to climate change summits at the UNFCCC. The next article that we have here is about the European Union not really being happy about America's latest plans of fighting against climate change. As you would remember, a few months back, the US government passed a very interesting law called Inflation Reduction Act, under which the US government said they will be spending $430 billion for climate change reversal in the US. They will be spending this money in the form of giving tax breaks, credits, etc. What they will do is they will provide subsidies to those who are buying electric vehicles. They'll provide subsidies to those companies who are working in fight against climate change. Now, the problem here is that the French president Emmanuel Macron, who is in US, has said that his country and entire European Union is not really happy about it. Why? Because they are saying that these credits or these subsidies being given to the companies are only applicable to the American companies and not to the European companies. So what is happening is many of the companies that are producing batteries, etc., or solar panels, etc., in Europe are now planning to relocate to US, saying that in order to have these benefits of the US subsidies, they have to go back to the US. This is what Europe is concerned about. As per this new law, only passenger electric vehicles which are assembled in North America are eligible for a $7,500 tax credit incentive. Also, those who buy EVs will be eligible for a $4,000 tax credit if 40% of the minerals used in the batteries are extracted from North America or in countries having a free trade agreement with America. So, in simple terms, all these incentives are meant for American companies or companies that are working in those nations which have a free trade agreement with America. Europe thinks that this is discriminatory against the countries which are based out of Europe and the European Union, and thus they don't like it. Their concern is Europe is anyways facing very high energy prices and the winters are now coming up because of the Ukraine-Russia war. Also, EU has its own green deal called the Fit for 55, under which they are trying to cut down CO2 emissions from cars by 55% by 2030. Now they fear that because of this plan of US, most of the EV companies, most of the companies that are producing solar batteries in Europe would now like to move to US. In fact, has already started. Swedish car battery manufacturer Northvolt has also made plans to shift to USA despite first having plans of making a factory in Germany. That is why France and other European countries don't seem to be very happy. US on the other hand says that we can certainly make such changes in our deal. It's not that we'll not accommodate our friends. We can make some small changes and make it easier for European nations to participate as well. But how and what changes are made needs to be seen in the future. Now, US is not the only country that is investing a lot of money to tackle climate change. European Union is doing the same. We have Japan also doing the same, and we have the same with India as well. US, being a huge country, is facing a lot of extreme climatic threats. There are heat waves, there are cyclones, floods, hurricanes that are becoming more and more common in the US. That is why when Joe Biden came to power, he first decided to introduce something called the Build Back Better plan. It was a multi-trillion dollar deal for climate change, but that did not pass in the Senate. Now, this IRA, that is Inflation Reduction Act, is a watered down version, a smaller version of the same Build Back Better plan only. The US plans to reduce its emission by 50 to 52%, then reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 31 to 44%, and also compete with China in terms of renewable energy production, because China right now is the world leader when it comes to producing solar batteries and all other renewable energy products in the entire world. There are certain issues with the bill as well. For example, it does not address the global climate finance problem. This money will only be spent in US, but what about the other nations? They don't say anything about that. Also, even this might not be enough to control the rise of temperature around the world to 2 degrees Celsius. The next article that we have here is about TRAI, the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, which recently asked people for its comments about its new program of calling name presentation feature. So this is very similar to Truecaller. Just like in the Truecaller app, when someone calls you, you get their name and then you decide whether you want to pick up the call or not. TRAI wants to do the same. Just that Truecaller is a private company, so there are a lot of debates and discussions about your right to privacy. Also, in Truecaller, you can actually enter your name in whatever way that you want. There is no guarantee that the name that you see in Truecaller will always be true, because this is not sourced from the government, it is sourced from individual people. So for example, if I actually put my name as XYZ, it will appear as XYZ to other people, it will not be my real name. There are still frauds that are happening on Truecaller, and the data that is being input on Truecaller is being used by the company for various purposes. So TRAI wants to have an alternative to that so that the people's privacy is maintained. Not only that, they are saying that people's name will appear as the name of the person who bought the SIM card. So it will be much more dependable. We won't have to people to put whatever name that they want here. So Truecaller actually will have a big competition now with the TRAI trying to introduce this new feature. Truecaller in its 2021 global spam report had said, on an average, an Indian receives close to 17 spam calls every month. I think this is even lower because I get at least 10 spam calls every single day. Now, the third parties like the Truecaller do help you to block certain numbers, but again, this goes against the caller's right to privacy. What if I don't want my name to be displayed anywhere? What if I am calling, let's say, someone with an important information? Let's assume I'm a whistleblower. I don't want my name to be appearing on the Truecaller, but that is not an option that I get on Truecaller. These kind of things will be available on the Try New App feature. That is what TRAI is actually asking the comments for, whether or not people suggest some changes in that aspect as well. Also, you would have noticed in the recent times, these spam calls are becoming more and more common. And the problem has become even more serious because earlier, when the companies used to call you up, let's say to sell you a credit card or something else, the companies had to register their number with TRAI. The telemarketers had to register themselves with TRAI. But now, what is happening is the telemarketers don't call you directly, they hire people on contract basis and then they call you. So this is a big loophole in the law. Vodafone will say that our employees are not calling people. They are individual people who have taken SIM cards and they are calling individual customers. So that is how they are not registered as telemarketers. So the existing law under which the telemarketing has to be registered first has had a lot of loopholes, and that is why the TRAI wants to change it. As I told you, the main difference between TRAI's new feature and Truecaller will be, on Truecaller, the name that you see is input by the person himself, so any name can be put. On TRAI, the name that you will see will be the name of the SIM card holder, the person on whose name the SIM card has been bought. So it will be much more dependable. You can actually expect that name to be much more honest. Also, Truecaller is one of those apps that has a lot of data of crores and crores of Indians. So there's always a probability of them misusing it, and the government wants to tackle that issue as well. These are the important articles in the Hindu newspaper today. Now, a couple of practice questions. Number one, India can find a dependable ally in the form of Germany in multiple spheres. In this context, bring out the areas of collaboration between India and Germany. Second, tackling Delhi's pollution would need much more than a ban on stubble burning. Elaborate. Both these questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Thank you so much for watching the video. Have a good day ahead.